Hello. Good afternoon, good morning, depending on what time it is. And happy World Water Day. This is a very exciting day for CWWA. I'm Robert Holler. I'm the Executive Director of the Canadian Water and Wastewater Association. And like I said, it's a big day for us. Not only is it World Water Day, but we're launching a big report today. There, you can see Towards a Sustainable Utility guidance document for water, wastewater, and stormwater utilities. We're launching this big guidance report today on our website. This has been well over a year in the making. We have a utility leadership committee that worked on a position statement that promoted the concept of a sustainable utility, but then they felt it's not good enough just having a statement. How do we help our members get there? So by sharing information, sharing experience, we could create a roadmap with a lot of guidance. I think of it like a CAA travel plan. Not only is it a roadmap, but it comes with all the hints of things to see and do and what you should be focusing on to get there. So we're really excited that we're launching that today. And you can get that at CWWA.ca. But of course, this is a big project. It took a team. The Utility Leadership Committee led by Carl Bottomede. Carl was a wonderful, persistent leader, and he wrote a lot of this as well and helping to contribute and get the whole team working on this. My job was to try to edit all the information coming in, but I couldn't do it alone. It was all done with a very good friend, Madeline Butchler. Thank you, Madeline, for all your hard work on that document. And then we had to hand our little baby over to Kara. And Kara Parisienne, from our manager of communications, created this beautifully designed and laid out document. So get it now, share it with as many people as you can, and I think it'll help our whole industry start to move forward in Canada. So I want to thank all the contributors, including all of my committee chairs that put something into this document. And as we started to plan a webinar series to replace the National Water and Wastewater Conference, the committee chairs agreed that the theme should be this report, this utility sustainability report. So each of them prepared one webinar based on one facet of sustainability. And so we've gone through 7 webinars since December. And here we're wrapping it all up today. And we're trying to bring it all together because each of those webinars looked at one slice of the question. And today we've asked some very senior general managers to talk about how they bring all of those aspects together to start moving towards a sustainable utility. So today we have a wonderful sponsor. I'm really excited to have this sponsor on board. One of the most exciting things going on in Canada is the Atlantic First Nations Water Authority. So representing that group today is Carl Yates. I have the honor of introducing Carl. I'll tell you very quickly, just over a year ago, before COVID hit, Carl was in Ottawa and he had 2 hockey tickets. And he called me up and he asked me to go to the game. I was very excited. And so we're going to the game and we're talking and I'm asking questions and I'm asking him questions. And then he looked over and he saw me looking in my pocket. And he's, "Are you looking at a list?" I said, "Yes, I have a list of questions for you." Because he's so busy and I had this honor of getting him locked in for hours. Carl and I work on this utility leadership committee. We work on the IWA Canadian committee together. We both work with the Alliance for Water Efficiency. Carl and I and Madeline Butchler are on the board of directors for the Operators Without Borders. And Carl is the chair of the Canadian Water Network, and we work very, very closely with that Canadian Water Network for our water industry. So I had so many things to talk to Carl about. He could just as easily be a member of today's panel, an engineer originally from Newfoundland, over 30 years experience in water utilities. We know Carl from Halifax Water, but he retired in 2019, but that was only after he recognized FCM's Sustainable Community Award, AWWA's George Warren Fuller Award for exemplary leadership. The Canadian Society of Civil Engineers gave him the Excellence an Engineering Innovation Award in 2014. This guy keeps getting better, like a bottle of wine. You're just getting better and more things coming at you, Carl. Most exciting, after he retired and then started his own consulting firm, he was asked to be the interim chief executive officer of the Atlantic First Nations Water Authority. And I say this is one of the most exciting things happening in water in Canada right now as we focus on this First Nations issue. And we've said it wasn't as much always about money and technology as it is about governance. And there's this spectacular new model, but I'll let Carl talk to you about that. Over to you, Carl.
All right. Well, thank you, Robert. And yeah, I'm glad you pointed out my one failure in my life, inability to retire. So I tried and I failed. So here I am back again. Certainly, I want to thank you for your kind words and also congratulate you on seeing this through in terms of a very successful webinar with all of our friends at the CWWA. But certainly on behalf of the Atlantic First Nations Water Authority, I want to welcome everybody today to this closing panel, making connections to really kind of knit everything together that we've seen over the previous panels and discussions. And what a great day to do it on World Water Day, as yet again we make that big announcement of the publication of the guidance document that Robert referred to. In terms of the Atlantic First Nations Water Authority, it actually is a very exciting opportunity for me to be part of this fledgling utility. I was part of it, I guess, to a certain extent for the last 7 or 8 years, providing some consulting support when I was general manager of Halifax Water. But recently, last year, was given the opportunity to lead this utility as it transitions to full autonomous operation by next year. So what's this all about? Well, the Atlantic First Nations Water Authority is really a utility that's by First Nations for First Nations, and is meant to tackle the difficult challenges and problems facing First Nation communities with a very different paradigm. We want to take a very long-term viewplane, which has been missing in the past, and actually focus on sustainable solutions. So how nice that our utility really matches the theme of what Robert is talking about in terms of the publication, but also what we've all been talking about over the last several months, this being the 8th closing panel. So with that, I'd like to certainly acknowledge the good work that everybody's done with CWWA, and glad actually to be, given the opportunity to sponsor the closing panel and be part of the CWWA family. We get a lot out of it when we put work into it. So congratulations again to everybody that's made this webinar a success, and congratulations to all that have contributed to the publication towards a sustainable utility. So with that, I'm now going to have the pleasure to introduce Joseph Lyons, who's going to be the facilitator of the panel today to try to keep some order amongst the crowd. And we've got some very distinguished guests on the panel, of course, that Joe will introduce. So Joe is an assistant professor at Western University in London and the director of the local government program in the Department of Political Science. This is one of the few public administration programs in Canada that focuses on the municipal level of government and has been training municipal leaders from across Canada for over 20 years, including our very own Robert Haller. So Robert Haller, I guess his ability to lead has been based on some of the good things he's learned at Western. Joe's research and teaching interests are in the areas of multi-level governance, that's definitely a favorite topic of mine, local government, public administration, and policy. He recently co-authored a book in 2020 with Zachary Spicer and Kate Graham titled Local Government in Practice, Cases in Governance, Planning, and Policy. So Joe, without further ado, I'll let you take it away and have fun this afternoon with our panelists. Have a great afternoon. Cheers.
Great. Thanks, Carl. Thanks for the introduction. And yes, it's my understanding, or I know that Robert's time with the MPA program was before mine, so I can't take any credit or blame for his leadership and management skills and expertise as he shepherds this organization into the future. As Robert did explain, the overarching theme of this session is bringing it all together. It's my understanding, and as Robert mentioned, that you folks have been looking at some of the most pressing issues facing the water sector through a series of events like this, but from a more specialized and technical perspective. Today, we are going to cap this series off by exploring these issues at a higher level of abstraction through the lens of a senior water utility leader. As someone who teaches local government administrators, I am familiar with many of the pressures faced by and priorities of senior municipal leaders in a general sense, but less about water utility leaders specifically. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. The panelists and I did meet in advance and decided to focus on 4 key themes, all related to changes facing the sector and how leaders balance competing demands. The 4 key themes are: first, the changing roles and responsibilities of water utilities; second, the changing water utilities workforce; third, changing relationships with customers; and fourth and finally, the changing regulatory and financial environment. Each question will be directed at a specific panelist for their take, and then the others will contribute with some brief observations, all with an eye to keeping the conversation moving and staying within our allotted time limit. Speaking of the panelists, I will introduce them now. First is John Presta. John is the Director of Environmental Services for the Regional Municipality of Durham, where he leads a team of 300 plus professionals responsible for water and wastewater services. His team operates 25 systems serving a population of over 600,000. John has been a professional engineer for 30 years, working in the field of municipal and water engineering. He has worked in both consulting and municipal government. John is a Fellow of Engineers Canada and has served as chair of the Professional Engineers of Ontario, Lake Ontario chapter. He is a past president of the Environment Association of Ontario and still serves as their delegate to the Water Environment Federation. Next is Cheryl Nelms. Wait for her to appear on screen here. There she is. Hi, Cheryl. Cheryl is the General Manager of Project Delivery for Metro Vancouver, where she oversees a portfolio of major infrastructure projects worth over $6 billion. Metro Vancouver serves 21 municipalities, 1 electoral area, and 1 Treaty First Nation, representing a population of over 2.5 million people. Previously, she was Deputy General Manager of Engineering Services at the City of Vancouver. Cheryl is a professional engineer with more than 20 years of experience, including senior executive roles with the federal government. She completed a PhD in civil engineering and has deep experience in the implementation of major infrastructure projects, especially public-private partnerships. Cheryl is also an adjunct professor at the University of British Columbia and frequently serves as an expert on intergovernmental committees of national interest. Our next panelist is Moira Gear. Moira is the director of the Water and Waste Department for the City of Winnipeg. Hi, Moira. A city of almost 800,000 people. So in her role at Winnipeg, she oversees operations and capital investments in water, wastewater, solid waste collections and disposal, waste diversion, land drainage, flood control, as well as the Office of Sustainability. Moira is a CPA by trade, so sort of an oddball out in the group, and has worked in the water and wastewater industry for 20 years. Moira has led a multitude of projects, including the Winnipeg Sewage Treatment Program, 3 sewage treatment plant upgrades, and a residential flood waste pilot, just to name a few. Moira served on the CWWA Management Division for many years and has participated in various Water Research Foundation projects. Last but not least is Francois Bouchard. Francois is the Acting Director of Water Resources for the City of Calgary. Hi, Francois. Where he is responsible for the planning of the water, wastewater, and stormwater services for 1.3 million customers. The Calgary Water Utility provides services to regional customers and plays an active role in watershed scale planning. Francois oversees planning and delivery of the infrastructure necessary for utility services and the laboratory services of the utility as well. Francois has over 30 years of experience in the water sector as an academic, a consultant, and a public servant. Francois joined the City of Calgary in 2007, and since that time he has advanced through the water utility from a senior planning engineer to his current role. Okay, with all of our panelists introduced, we will now move on to the discussion. The first question, as I alluded to earlier, is about the changing roles and responsibilities of water utilities. Historically, utilities have been preoccupied with getting water from the source to the treatment plant to consumers, and then collecting water and wastewater for treatment and release to an outlet. Now, however, most utilities are moving towards a watershed-based approach and must account for factors such as source protection, the downstream effects of effluent, climate change, and extreme weather events, among others. So the broad question for the group is, how has this affected you in your role as senior leader? And we introduced Francois last, but he's actually going to take the first cut at this question. So over to you, Francois.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you for the CWWA for inviting me today on this panel. So that's a really important question in terms of how are we changing as a water utility and evolving due to the environmental as well as changes in society and the expectations of our customers. And what I'm going to do to answer this question is really focus more on the environmental changes and less on the changing expectations of customers, because we're going to address that in a little while. But from an environmental perspective, Calgary is a very large city on a small river, and therefore the climatic changes that we're starting to see, as well as we can anticipate in the future, is definitely changing the way that we do our business. And it really forces us to expand beyond our municipal boundary. So in the past, we were really focused in terms of what's happening within the city of Calgary and not worry too much about what was happening upstream or downstream in terms of our operations. But that has really changed. And like I said, there's a greater understanding, a greater awareness of climate change issues, but we're also in a watershed that is continuing to see growth. And with that growth, greater urban development, and therefore greater pressure on our resources. And the question is no longer one of how do we meet the needs of our own customers, but what role do we play within the region in terms of the sharing of the water resources and how that might impact not only other municipalities, but also more traditional industries like agriculture, which has a strong need for irrigation water. So that has changed our focus as a utility from one of looking just inwardly, but spreading out and looking at how we work with the region, both in terms of source protection, in terms of making sure that the quality of our source water remains affordable from a treatment perspective, but also from a water security perspective as we see the glaciers receding in our headwaters. And many of you have probably a lot of experience focusing on both climate change, which is not something new, or even a lot of experience working with regional partners. But one thing that I do want to share is one experience that, or one issue that we've been tackling, which we did not anticipate a few years back. And that is really the role that wildfires, forest fires have on our operations. What we have been seeing in the last few years is an intensification, an increase in the number of wildfires that are occurring in Western Canada and Northwestern United States. And we looked at, well, what were the risk implications of those forest fires? And what we've identified is that forest fires actually are one of two major risks to our water supply system. And that has really required us to think in terms of, is that going to change due to climate change? Are these occurrences going to increase? And does that have an implication in terms of water quality? So doing research to understand the implications in terms of treatment, but also encouraging us to work with our neighbors, work with these other industries like the forest product industry to look at what kind of practices, what are the management practices that are occurring within our watershed? Are those practices changing? And can we influence land use upstream of our water treatment plants? Both in terms of water quality, but also in terms of what are those forestry practices that are going to minimize the risks of forest fires. So it really points to the fact that, yes, our business is changing, and in some cases, it's changing in unexpected ways. Like I said, a few years back, I would have never thought that some of my team members would have to interact and work with the forestry service and with forest product, the industry, to look at how those practices in the watershed need to change to reflect those risks. I'll leave it at that and maybe give some time for others.
Great. Thanks, Francois. Yeah, and if the other panelists want to turn their cameras on so we can see all of you, that would be great. So yeah, Francois shared with us his experiences and his insights in relation to forest fires and how that affects his utility. I'm sure others on the panel are facing similar pressures, albeit likely not from forest fires necessarily, but from other extreme weather events or natural hazard type phenomena. So if anyone want to share some insights on sort of the watershed-based approach taken by their utility. Yeah, Moira.
Sure. One impact we've really noticed in the city of Winnipeg, we live in a floodplain, and spring flood protection is a major line of business that we're in. It's the confluence of the Assiniboine and the Red Rivers, and it's a very large watershed. But what we've found in the last few years is that it's just not a spring phenomenon anymore. We have wicked storms in the summer. We have high river levels throughout the summer months. One year, and was a couple years ago, I think the actual peak river level happened in the fall. So for us, like if we look at the resilience and the flood planning and the prep and how the infrastructure functions, is what was once a spring event can actually happen spring, summer, and fall. And then we go to this year, fast forward to this year, that it's really going to be a non-event. I don't think the rivers have ever been this low. We've had a couple of really dry winters and spring and fall, but it's just really the extremes in the weather patterns really impact how we respond to flood events now.
Thanks, Moira. John or Cheryl, would you like to add anything? Yeah, go ahead, John.
Sure. We're also a region of Durham. We have a very long water frontage along Lake Ontario, and we've also seen coastal flooding with Lake Ontario. The water level is rising, increased erosion of communities that are very close to Lake Ontario. So that's going to be a challenge where previously we didn't have any problems along the lake shore. It's a very large lake, but with the rise of the lake level, we do have this challenge.
Thanks, John. I'm just being cognizant of time here. Cheryl, did you want to add something quickly?
No, we'll just
okay. Yeah. All right. So from extreme weather events to kind of switching gears, so on the theme of the many competing demands facing senior leaders, we'll turn our attention now to a question relating to the changing workforce of water utilities. Despite the importance of hard infrastructure, utilities have always relied on people. This will continue, but the nature of the professions and professionals involved is changing. The sector is seeing retirements and the loss of institutional knowledge at the same time as new skills and approaches are in demand, such that there is a need for new ways of doing business and new recruitment practices, with an eye to recruiting and retaining highly skilled individuals from varied and diverse backgrounds. So how have these changes influenced your approach to workforce development? And on this question, we'll start with John Presta.
Thank you, Joe. I think the research has shown that we were all aware that there would be a very large wave of potential retirements in not only our industry, but throughout the global industry, throughout the world. So this potential loss of internal knowledge is, as I mentioned, upon most water utilities in Canada. Obviously, it can differ based on the location and size where you are, and the number of key resources that potentially could retire. And there's really no simple answer to this problem or challenge. However, one of the aspects that we've tried to implement is, through annual performance management, trying to establish a better relationship with your staff, so you can understand when they think they will actually retire, because retirement is actually a very personal decision, life changing, and not just simple. You reach a certain age, 65, and you're going to automatically retire. We have people that are retiring between 50 and 75, so there's a big range there now. So one area where we've made the case in one circumstance in the region, on the drinking water side, we made the case to actually hire an extra staff member, so that that person could rotate through the 4 operating areas of our drinking water system. It made sense from a succession planning point of view. We've also worked with our human resources department to work with individuals that, if they are going to retire, say in a year and a half, and they commit to that date, then that allows us to hire staff earlier, and that allows some training to take on, and some job shadowing, which it's worked well in a few circumstances. Obviously, these small strategies, the feasibility of implementing them on a large corporate level is not practical. There would be a huge financial commitment, and trying to increase your staff. But that's sort of some of the strategies that we've used. However, when you spoke about the changing workforce development, we've looked at obviously process improvements, and in some circumstances that means major investments in modernizing how we conduct our work processes. And so I think this is where we've found that you bring in technology so you could work more efficiently. One of the operational areas, we were we had many processes in terms of documenting items or data, basically the hard copies, paper copies being used, and double or triple data entry, so that have all these spreadsheets all over that would be stored in binders, that it would be quite a task to try to find the information. So this led us to basically modernizing our data management system, which obviously leads to new skills and knowledge for our staff. So we established a new data system, management system, to reduce, the goal was to get rid of the paper copies as much as possible, automate data capture directly from the source, implemented electronic logbooks for our operators. This allows we also had visual portals for data information for our frontline operators. And obviously with the visualization of operating data, you can create easy to understand dashboards and graphs. So that makes the provides the frontline operator better understanding of what's going on in the process, and they can understand the information a lot better. But as I said, this is the modernization of the data management. There's only one aspect. There's the whole training aspect of our operators, the use of digital technology, being able to basically manipulate obtain the right data at the right time so you can make the right decisions. Right in the facility, it doesn't take weeks on end to try to gather the binders for the information. So, and with these pending, the other thing I would just mention is, with the pending retirements, it does provide an opportunity to create a more diverse workforce. When you're renewing your workforce, we work closely with the local academic institutions, work with the young students, go in and have a relationship in terms of making presentations and having summer job opportunities, so that we all know research has shown that with a diverse workforce, you can accomplish things better, be more creative, and be better problem solvers. I'm sure my colleagues would agree with me as I see the nods. But anyways, that's what I have to offer today.
Great. Thanks, John. You certainly covered a lot of ground there. I was keeping notes. John talked about performance management, talked about the impending perhaps wave of retirements and succession planning. One possible strategy being to expose people to different elements of the organization. And then he moved into a discussion about more modern forms of data management through visualization and dashboards, as well as the benefits of recruiting and retaining a diverse workforce. So any aspects of that answer that any of the panelists would like to jump in on? Cheryl.
Sure, and this sort of connects with what we were just talking about. I'm really been heavy on interest on the retention aspect and attraction into this industry. So one of the things that we've looked at is working actually with our consulting community. We're spending just under $100 million a year in consulting dollars, and so the question is how are they experiencing pressure? And it feels like this question is not new. Like it's been not new since since I entered the industry, and was 20 years ago or 25 years ago. So, but what we're working with the industry on is asking the question, how are you retaining? How are you attracting just as much as we are? And so one of the things that we've looked at talking to them about is maybe in our RFPs, putting in a clause to say, well, how many, having a specific clause saying for people with less than 2 years of experience, and we measure them, we can be awarding contracts with that as well, not just, so we could be a little bit more specific on years of experience, so to bring in and I get them to attract and bring in new hires into the workforce and into this specific industry. We've also looked at working across and attract people from the vertical infrastructure side to bring them into this horizontal infrastructure side, specifically with respect to BIM, artificial intelligence, computational engineering, where that's a lot more, I would say, at least on the bigger infrastructure side, a lot more developed than in the water infrastructure side, at least in Canada. And so bringing those types of individuals into our work force. And so those are the sort of things that we look at. I'm personally very interested in attracting, new Canadians and on the gender spectrum, like on the gender spectrum, but specifically women, where our rates of women retained in the engineering side are still extremely low, and they seem to be at the same rate of those that are professional engineers, or at almost the same as 20 years ago. So we haven't really moved very far on that spectrum. So I think the 30 by 30, like the 30 by 2030 sort of initiative that our Canadian Engineering Association is working on, our provincial associations are working on, are important parts to participate in. So I think there's lots of work that we can do, and I think I'd be with John in terms of going out there and speaking about what we do, attracting people into our industry, and then retaining them once they're in are the big pieces, and to recognize that it's not just in the public sector, that this is experienced in like across sectors, and so we all have a big piece to play.
Thanks, Cheryl. It's always interesting to hear about ways that large organizations like the City of Vancouver can sort of leverage their muscle to encourage more diversity and inclusiveness through things like contracting, and they're dealing with consultants. City of Toronto's doing interesting things in this area too. We should probably move on to our next question, unless Francois or Moira want to say anything quickly about this topic. Yeah, Francois, just real quick.
Sorry, you said real quick, and then I realized that I muted myself. My apologies. One last thing that I wanted to add from a workforce management perspective is that while we continue to drive our cost efficiencies in terms of our labor costs down, there are certain technologies that we're investing in that require brand new expertise. So, for example, we're looking at the installation of a thermal hydrolysis plant. It's one of our wastewater treatment plants, and that requires expertise and qualifications that we currently don't have within the water utility. So while we're trying to increase the efficiencies of our current staff and what we do, there's still a need to grow that workforce base to be able to cover those new technologies.
Thanks, Francois. And I think that's a nice transition to our next question about customers and customer relations, in that, these are perhaps new skills needed in terms of the utilities workforce. So a similar example to what Francois was just speaking to. So yeah, let's shift our attention to that topic now, the changing nature of the relationship with customers. So in my discussions with you, I've learned that customers want access to more and real-time information about their usage, water quality, service levels, and possible disruptions and interruptions. Apart from getting information out to customers, utilities are also increasingly trying to influence behavior around issues like water consumption and toilet flushing habits. And utilities also need to build public support so that customers better understand the connection between water rates and the value of the water that they receive when they turn on their taps. These demands have prompted utilities to become more sophisticated and strategic in their communications. So, what approach is your utility taking with respect to communications and public relations? And Moira, we'll start with you on this question.
Thank you, Joe. And I'll just say I'm the oddball panelist that's not an engineer, but I consider myself an honorary engineer because I've been in the industry for 20 years. So an interesting question. Like there's been huge changes all around in the utility with the customer. The customer change is something that's really drives a lot of our business processes now. It's really the advent of technology, smartphones, in recent years, social media, like it really has changed how we have to manage that whole customer relationship. And technology can be very beneficial. I mean, it's certainly very obvious during the pandemic, where we're able to continue delivering essential services during COVID, even including today's seminar. So there's some real opportunities, but there's also some real challenges with that too. So what I'd like to just talk a little bit is what I see where it's helped us, where it's kind of creates more work and what we're doing here in Winnipeg. And it's not just the value of water, it's also the environmental agenda, which I think is much stronger now than it was. So from the water and the wastewater perspective, In Winnipeg's case, we have billions of dollars to invest to protect our lakes and rivers in Manitoba. And, you know, as long as I've been here, the customers have had a rate increase every year. So today's customers, what they want is they want detailed information. I think we would all understand and appreciate that. They want access to information and at a time and in a method that's convenient to them. They want openness, transparency. They want to hold us accountable, and they want everything now. The immediacy, I think, is a real big change we've seen in the industry. And when I think of customers, I don't think of just the ratepayers. When I think about customers, I think about it's the elected officials, it's the special interest groups, it's the media, it's the regulators, and any other stakeholders, which we have many. So if I would say like 20 years ago when we had a rate increase, the extent of our public outreach and communications was place a nice ad in the weekend newspaper and have a paper bill insert with the quarterly bill going to customers and sit back and wait for them to ask us questions about why the rates increased. And that was really the extent of it. There was not a lot of effort and there wasn't a lot of strategy. Now, in our operations today in the water and waste department itself, we have 6 communication specialists, a web specialist, and the city itself, because the city of Winnipeg is part of the overall municipal government, we actually have a customer service and communications division, including a public engagement office. And I think it existed in one way, shape, or form at some point, but not, it wasn't a strategic arm of government that it is now. And City Council made the commitment and gave resources to that group. And we spent a lot of time with them. Just in terms of the advantages of the technology, I think, you know what, we do have a multi-pronged approach to outreach to our customers in a broader way through our website, through Twitter, through Facebook, social media. And it is more cost effective than the traditional print, and you can do cool infographics and that sort of thing, so you can reach out to the younger generation. It helps elected officials because they retweet whatever we put out there. And you know, that's sort of the social media aspect. Customers now, for their utility account information, their usage, their billing, there's a customer portal. They can self-serve. We don't have a huge uptake yet, but we hope to. That leads us to, you know, we can have cost savings in the future to go to a paperless utility billing system. We're not there yet. We basically have 24-hour service for customers now on certain things through our web portals and through our 311 customer service. What's interesting too, just to relate back to the workforce question, the call center representatives that, you know, get the angry customer calls, there's usually a really high turnover. But during the pandemic, we've equipped all of these staff to work from their homes, which is a more pleasant environment, and we've had no turnover in the past year. So, I mean, I don't think it's necessarily, I mean, some of it has to be job security during pandemic, but it just goes to show you what we can do with technology from a workplace perspective. You know, one of the things that we're able to do with technology is we integrate our critical systems with the public-facing website. As an example, our GIS systems and our work management system, customers can go to the city's website and real time on a map can see where there's been a water main break and what the estimated time is for repair. You know, we're able to, with virtual private networks, work anywhere, unfortunately at any time. I think there's, you know, the sanctity of people's homes is lost a bit during the pandemic. And, you know, we have real time data for field operations. You know, they have live access to all of the information. So what that means for the customer, it's a better experience for the customer. We can respond more quickly. We're using resources more efficiently. So we provide a very, you know, it's improved the customer service, and we do occasionally get compliments. Not often, but sometimes. So, I mean, that's just an example of some of the really good things technology has done for us, but some of the disadvantages of technology, I would say for me, the first one is like nobody ever picks up the phone anymore. You know what? Sometimes the easiest solution is just have a conversation, a good old-fashioned call, but people just so over-rely on email now. And if you don't respond to your email quickly enough, you get a text, because that's the sort of the instantaneous way to get a response. So, You know, if I compared the volume of phone calls I get compared to emails and texts, like it's a very, very small percentage. You know, the advent of smartphones makes our business everybody's business. And the best example I can share with you is I was at a meeting. Winnipeg's most famous intersection is Portage and Main. It has a fair bit of traffic volume. It's in the downtown area of the city of Winnipeg. And I'm in a meeting and I get a call from the mayor's office because there's a water main break that's disrupting traffic at Portage and Main. And I bet you the foreman on the crew didn't even know about it. What had happened was somebody in an office tower in the corner of that intersection took a picture of the water main break, tweeted it out, mayor's office picked it up, and we weren't even aware yet. So that has changed. That has changed things. You know what, when we go to council meetings and committee meetings, everything's broadcast live on the city's YouTube channel. So there's not Hansard anymore on the website. There's live videos. And it changes the proceedings for us because the elected officials who like to have their 5 minutes of fame or their airtime, you know, it's a communications channel for them. So the meetings tend to last a lot longer. And really, because it's being live broadcast, you really have to watch your facial expressions at some point. You know, you have to have that look of poker face. You know what, for field staff, it creates challenges, and it creates challenges for us. That something could seem really innocuous all of a sudden is a story. And you know, you could be in a city of Winnipeg truck out, you know, fixing water main breaks, and on your way to the job site, you hit the drive-through at Tim Hortons, and next thing you know, there's a photo out there complaining about the waste of taxpayers' dollars, although there was no wrongdoing, but that's just the way the eyes of the world are on us. You know, another example is somebody gets a really high water bill, takes a picture of their meter, sends it to CBC News. So we get it in the media. Combined sewer overflows that don't look really nice when the river levels are low, so on and so forth. So I think for the public service, there's a lot of pressure on us to meet these really high expectations from all of our stakeholders, and the demand for immediate information. And that's part of our jobs now. Maybe it wasn't so much.
Oh, thanks, Moira. Yeah, you really conveyed the sense of the sort of need or the immediacy at which information is relayed within the sector, the sort of the need for it on the perceived need for it, at least on the part of customers, and how water utilities are responding. So thanks for that.
Thank you.
So just cognizant of time here, I think we should move on to our fourth and final question. And this question focuses on operations. So I'll do my best to set the scene here, and then when I turn it to Cheryl and the other panelists, you guys can correct me as well, as just sort of an observer of the sector, not someone intimately involved with it. But I'll try to set the scene here, right? Infrastructure is aging. The regulatory landscape is constantly changing. There are new contaminants to deal with. And in some places, water efficiency improvements are reducing usage and thereby revenues. So all this is to say that budgets are tight. So how do we, keeping, I guess, with the theme of the report that was just released and this session, how do we plan for the long-range sustainability of utilities, considering these factors that I just mentioned and others that I surely missed? So as I mentioned, Cheryl, we'll start with you on this one.
Sure. And you know, I think we talked about a lot of the challenges in responding to each of these questions, like through here. One of the things, like if I wrap this up, you know, the big piece is, yeah, we've got huge asset renewal requirements in all of our programs. We've got, you know, changes in requirements and regulatory requirements and extra pressures. We got changes in expectations from the public. Those are all the challenges that we experience. I've been only working in areas like for larger cities or regions where it's a growing population. So the revenues have been increasing alongside the population. But yes, there's been conservation, but the growth of the population has been higher than relative to the conservation aspect. So what I would say is, I think that we have a lot of opportunities at the same time. I think we're at a point in time where, all of that public interest there that we hear about and that we see through communications is because there's an interest in the environment. There's an interest in recognition now that there's climate change. And there's actually, from my experience, there's been an interest and willingness to pay for service and for capital infrastructure. So when I show, fixing pipes, there's a lot more interest from the taxpayer, the ratepayers, to be paying for that, as well as from the development community to be paying for new infrastructure. Although it gets tied into affordability, but I'm saying relative to other services that may be offered by a utility or by a municipality or by other public entity, it's people recognize it and understand it. So that's been my experience, and so that is an opportunity that I see. And then from a how do we address this? How do we do long range planning for all of this? I think there's a real need for improved estimating, budgeting, and capital planning for how we do look forwards of what we need to do and to meet those requirements. And then when we see those big numbers, because in this ever complex industry, the projects are huge. I think all of us around this table are dealing with a lot bigger project sizes than we've ever probably, it's just the growth on the project dollar size, and the complexity of the projects is way different than before. And that's for all types of major infrastructure projects, because the permitting environment is different. The First Nations partnership environment is very different, and the stakeholder environment is different, and the overall expectation for meeting above and beyond just the technical requirements is just different. And so with all that, I think there's opportunities on alternative financing. I've come with that background with delivering P3s or public-private partnerships, but I don't think that's the be-all end-all. I've never believed that be-all end-all. But what I would say is that there is interest for that as an option in our industry for some types of projects. And I also think that there's a lot more appetite to be looking at development cost charges and looking for growth, paying for growth more appropriately than I think any of us are able to currently get in our cities. I think there's an existing challenge. And so I think the piece is really looking at the numbers and getting a better handle on our numbers, better look at our plans, looking at value engineering to bring it down, because we're going to see the numbers are being huge, and incremental changes that we're going to have to look at, and then look at source of funding and recognizing that we can't just work within our own area. We're going to have to start partnering with others impacted or benefiting from the infrastructure that we're putting into place. So I hope that's my summary for this, Joe. And I know it's a big complex piece to summarize in 3 minutes, but that's where I'd start it.
No, I think you did a lovely job, and a couple themes in there that we could pick up on, I think, in our last few minutes. One thing I think that Cheryl talked about that we haven't talked about too much today in respect to the other questions is the increasing importance of partnerships for water utilities. And so maybe that's something that one of the panelists would like to share their experiences about.
Hello, it's John. We actually have a partnership with an adjacent regional government where we co-own a very large facility and share the services. So it's not it was planned years ago in the 80s, but definitely we've seen rewards in terms of working jointly on problems and servicing a very large service area of ultimately, over 1 million customers that gets wastewater treatment.
Great. Yeah. So, good example or a good illustration of how there are many different kinds of partners utilities can work with, public sector as well as private sector. Francois, I saw you had a hand there as well. So
Yeah,
over
I
to you.
do. And from a partnership perspective, absolutely, in terms of working with the various stakeholders within the watershed and how we can identify common outcomes. But one partnership also that I want to highlight is our customers and how do we bring them along. And we've moved from a business where we were thrilled if nobody talked about us. We were this invisible service, and it just happened in the background. And that's not good enough anymore. From being able to run a successful water utility, we need to learn and transform how we tell our story so that we have the buy-in of our customers. We are seeing societally a shift away from trusting government, trusting technical experts, to one where there is a desire to be involved and an active participant in the dialogue, including the services that we deliver. And therefore, in terms of the sustainability of our services, we need to learn as an industry how to have a conversation, how to tell our story. We've actually hired a consultant to help us tell better stories. So it's not just using our communication team, but actually what's good storytelling. If you've ever heard of story slams, we're practicing story slams so that we can tell good stories. The other part that's going to be really important in terms of sustainability of the utility is understanding the level of service that our customers want. But that's creating that dialogue again of getting insights into our customer base. What is it that they really want? What do they value? And are they willing to pay for that value?
Great. Thanks, Francois. A nice sort of comprehensive summary, I think, of the session as well. And I think we're just about at our time. So I imagine Robert's going to want to sign back on here and provide some closing remarks. But just as he's doing that, or before he does that, I just want to thank all the panelists for sharing your insights and your experiences and your perspectives on these questions, kind of thinking about the big picture and the long-term sustainability of the water sector. I certainly found it very enlightening, as I'm sure the audience did. And here I see Robert, so I'll turn things over to him to close out the session.
Wow, you pulled it all back together again, Joe. Thank you. And what a great webinar today. I too want to thank all of you. Joe, thanks a lot, and to Western and the local government program. It made a big difference in my life. And I know John Presto was a graduate of that MPA program as well. So if anybody's looking to train some of your young municipal leaders, it's a great program there. But all of you from all across the country, thank you very much for coming on board. We're going right from Metro Vancouver, Calgary, Winnipeg, into Ontario. And we started in Atlantic Canada with Carl Yates. I do want to thank the Atlantic First Nations Water Authority as our sponsor today. Our sponsors are very important. More importantly, I want to let you know, Carl, and everyone at the AFNWA, that we're here for you. If the CWWA can support the AFNWA in their development, access to our resources, to our network of professionals, we're here to support you. Don't forget, our guidance document is on the website. Happy World Water Day. Get to our website and you please share that document with everyone. I want to thank everyone that contributed to that. When are we going to get to see each other again? Sadly, our window on Ottawa is going to be virtual, but we're doing a window on Ottawa along with the Canadian Water Summit and Water Canada magazine in June. Stay tuned to our bulletin. You'll get all the information, but June 8, 9, 10, we're going to be having a joint event of the window on Ottawa and the Water Summit. But I really hope that we're going to see you face to face in Niagara Falls in November. Once we've all had our vaccine and we're allowed to see each other again, we do hope to see everyone in Niagara Falls in November. Again, happy World Water Day, and thank you all panelists and Joe very, very much.